by default, I'm going to have to root for the Maple Leafs. So sorry to tell you, I won't be cheering for the Sens.
Let's rock.
All right, we might have to put a little wager on that one, I think.
Ooh, okay. Well, I always, you know what my favorite wager is?
What's that?
Cold beers next time you're in town. Hello, everybody. This is Andy Curran. Let's rock.
Welcome back to Let's Rock.
Yes, good to see you again, man.
Absolutely. You were here the after you had just released the first Envy of None album.
Yeah.
And here we are. I don't even know how many years it's been. 2 years, 3 years?
You know what? I think it's getting close to three. I really do. I lost track of time there, and we despite the fact that we're very proud of the second record, it took a while to get into the groove and get that thing going. So it's been a hot minute since we've spoken.
Stygian Waves.
Yes, it's a bit of a tongue twister, right? Stygian Waves. So the name of the record comes from the same place that the band name came from, which is a quote from a philosopher named Ovid. And the band name, I think we probably spoke about it the first interview. David Steinberg, who is actually Rush's attorney, but he's also a great drummer. He played in with Stid Baders and the Dead Boys, and he had his own band called the Mods. He and I were talking one day, and I said, "Man, we got to come up with a name for this band." And he said, "Well, I've got one that I've been sitting on forever," and he tells me that it's Envy of None. And I said, "I love that. Where does it come from?" And he said, "Oh, it's a quote from Ovid, and in that quote, there's some reference made to the river Styx and Stygian waves, which means that you're apparently entering the gates of hell." I don't know,
Yeah.
but Alex loved it. And he was adamant. That's the name of our record. That's the name of our record. And a funny story for you was that the label was a little taken aback. They said, "We don't even know how to pronunciate this thing. Like, it's all phonetics and everything." They said, It's going to cause a lot of confusion." To which Alex said, "Great, that's perfect. Let's go with it. Confusion is a good thing. Let's make people think." And the label came back and said, "Could we convince Alex to call the record Permanent Waves instead of Stygian Waves?"
Oh my God. That would be a little bit of a clash, right?
Yeah, I think it was their attempt at humor, but usually the artist wins out, and when Alex Lifeson says he wants something, you try to give it to him, right?
Well, yeah, he kind of knows what he's doing, I think, after his
He's
career.
been, he's been around a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I loved the first album, and I told you that before. But
Thank you.
this album seems a little more aggressive,
Yeah,
uh, a little more in your face than the first one did. Uh,
yeah.
so this is probably a standard question for you, but is this a planned thing, or is it just how things evolve in the writing process?
I think a bit of the latter, Ken. Things did evolve in the writing process. I think we all got the feeling that we were starting to be a closer knit unit in terms of we kind of gave each other the respect and space that everybody needed, and the turf that everybody was carving out. But I think that in the face, maybe, and in the face comment that you made, or it's sounding a little bit aggressive, is indicative of us using real drums for every single song. First record, we didn't do that. There was some loops, there was some drum machines, there was some rhythmic, sort of almost like industrial type patterns on the first record. And as we approached finishing off the first record, we started to add a couple of human drummers on it, and Alex was a big fan of that. And he said, wherever we can, I love the human element. We should try to use less machines, more humans. And so enter Randy Cook, who I've played with for a very long time. Randy lives in LA, and was playing with Dave Stewart and the Eurythmics. And Randy's such a seasoned veteran people might know him from playing with Kim Mitchell, and he played with Lee Aaron, and he played with Rick Emmett. But he moved to LA, quite a few years ago, and quickly became a very sought after session drummer. And so Randy and he was aware of Envy of None, and said, called me up one day, kind of poking fun at me. He said, "When are you going to call me? Are we not friends anymore?" Yeah, and I was like, "Well, it's funny. The timing of this is pretty cool because we're going to try to use real drums." And so that was something that we was pre-planned, and we really wanted to do that wherever possible. And I think the sound of the second record is indicative of that. It's a little, it feels like a band now because we actually used humans on every single track, right? So I think that's what you're referring to, Ken. It definitely has given the project more focus, I think, too, having real drums on it.
Okay, I just gotta say this, Randy Cook. This guy comes up in so many of my interviews. It's
He
incredible.
does, eh?
And,
Is that right?
well, I talked to Phil X last week.
Yeah.
Uh, he played with Randy in
Yes,
many.
he did.
Um, and funny story, when I was in, I don't know how well you know Ottawa, but I was in Algonquin College radio program years and years and years ago, and I
Okay.
went to a free Rick Emmett show and bumped into this guy, and I said, "This guy's got to be the drummer." He just looked like a drummer, and I walked up to him and I said, "You're the drummer from Rick Emmett?" And he said, "Yes." He got me back to do a liner and a quick little interview with Rick Emmett. So Randy Cook is
Yeah.
responsible for me continuing and doing all these interviews. He started the whole thing rolling.
Oh my God, Ken, that's crazy. He's just a bundle of energy, and he's got such good vibes about him. He's a super funny guy. He's a networker. Doesn't surprise me that he brought you backstage and was wheeling and dealing. But he's been a pleasure to work with. And we called up Joe Vitale, who Joe played on the first record, and is probably best well known for playing with Joe Walsh. But he's played with everybody from the Eagles to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So Joe Vitale played on a couple songs on Stygian Wavz, and Alex was doing some fundraising charity work, and he got a call from Robbie Krieger from The Doors, and he does these sort of charity jams, and the drummer on this charity jam was a guy by the name of Ty Dennis. And Alex came home from I forget whether it was Florida or California somewhere, and said, "Man, Robbie Krieger's drummer is awesome. Is this guy named Ty Dennis? We should work with him." So Ty also plays drums on Stygian Wavz, as does our buddy David Steinberg that I just mentioned to you, who is not only our attorney, but he's also a damn fine drummer. So we got about four different drummers on this record, um, and Randy played on the majority of the material. I think he played on five tracks over almost half of the record.
Nice. The thing that struck me in that little answer you just gave, how cool would it be to just get a phone call from Robbie Krieger?
Oh my God, I know, right? And I was, with all due respect to Randy, he's a buddy, and I think he's one of the best drummers in the world. But for me, it was a bit of a fanboy moment, even speaking with Joe Vitale and looking at his resume and his career and who he's played with, and Alex is such a generous, kind guy that he gets invited to these charity things, and charity is a big part of what Alex loves to do. So I think he's made the Robbie Krieger Jam a bit of an annual thing. Um, and he plays on the Andy Kim Christmas that happens every year at Massey Hall. So Alex loves to give back, and that kind of spilled into Envy of None on the first record when we did a fundraiser for the refugees in Ukraine. I think you and I spoke about that last time. And we're going to see if we can continue to do that. So there's a real part of everything Alex loves to do kind of spills into Envy of None, and we're happy to do any of that charity stuff.
Nice. Okay, let's get back to this writing process. Something that really struck me is how much is going on in each of these songs. First album and second album, actually. And I'm just wondering, when you come up with an idea for a song for something like this,
Yeah.
You have a riff, say like Limelight, right? He doesn't come in with a Limelight type riff and everyone can jam around it.
Yeah.
So much stuff keeps getting added to the song. How does it go from, the first initial idea and manifest its way into what we hear on the album? Because there's so much happening, man.
Yeah, Ken, that's a great question and very astute of you to recognize that because the layering and the production and the amount of TLC that has gone into tracking this record um, has created this backdrop and landscape of sounds that you're talking about. And oftentimes it becomes an exercise in discipline on like how much are we going to use of this because the writing process is really interesting. For the most part, I would say, Ken, that a lot of the riffs originate from myself and Alfio, and will traditionally send each other ideas that could be as short as 30 seconds or maybe as long as 2 minutes. If it's a little bit more developed, it would be on the 2 minute side, meaning that there might be an intro and a verse and a chorus, and I'll just send that off to him, or vice versa. And usually it's followed up with, "Hey, Alf, what do you think?" or "Hey, Andy, what do you think?" Um, and Alf and I will start developing it to a place where we go, are we happy enough to send it off to Alex and Maya and see what they think about it, right? And that's usually what ends up happening is especially if I have a seed of a lyrical or vocal idea, which was the case in Not Dead Yet and maybe Under the Stars and Handle with Care. Those are three songs that I can think of that when I sent them off to Maya, there was a little bit of what I call a whisper vocal. It's a hint of I think this could be the melody line. Maybe a couple of these vocal hooks could be used in there lyrically, and I'll send them off to her. Out of respect that she's the singer, she's the vocalist, so I don't want her to just to be a puppet and give lyrics and melodies and go sing it. She's got so much more to offer than that, and she's got quite an amazing gift of layering harmonies. A lot of what you're talking about, or believe it or not, Maya's, sometimes 20 plus tracks of vocals, right? And then you start getting into stuff that Alex layers on, which we spoke about this on the first record, like he's, intentionally crafting guitar sounds that don't sound like guitars. He'll take an acoustic guitar and he'll flip it backwards and put some reverb on it and chorusing and layer it in, or he'll do an electric guitar track and he'll chop it up to make it sound like it's rhythmic, almost like a keyboard, right? So again, those that to that to kind of wrap up the answer is those seeds of the ideas will start usually with Alpha and I, and then they get sent over to Alex and Maya, and then the layers start adding on to it. And if almost you picture like a cake that you're baking and you're layering it, the first layer, the second layer, and then the icing goes on the top and some cherries. That's kind of how we work. And when it finally gets finished and everybody's happy with their ideas, it gets pushed back to Alfio, and Alfio starts mixing it. And the advancements in technology have been such that there's programs, for instance, called audio movers, where I can get a phone call from Alfio going, log into audio movers. I'm mixing this track real time, and it's almost like our Zoom call that we're on here. But on a screen, I can see the mixing consoles and I can see the names of the tracks. And he'll be, remember when we sent this idea out, Andy? You put a guitar in it. It kind of conflicts with the new one that Alex puts on. Then do we want to keep both of them? And nine times out of ten, we'll say no. Mute that one. Let's be able to feature that new overdub that Alex did, or a vocal that Maya did, right? So it becomes an exercise then in clearing out the landscape after we've layered and layered and layered and layered, right? But if Alf was on the call with us, he'd tell you that usually he tries to make everything work, but it becomes pretty challenging, Ken, because to get nerdy with you for a second, it's not so much sometimes about the parts themselves. It's about the frequency range that they take up. And if that space, let's say the vocal space and the frequency of the vocal, for the sake of this conversation, that might be 1.5 on the scale of the frequencies. And if there's an electric guitar in there and an acoustic guitar in there and a keyboard in there, and they're all in that same register, they all start competing and fighting for space. So then you have to go, well, I really want the vocal to read. Something's conflicting with it. I either got to pull it down or mute it. So the layering and the discipline to figure out which parts we're going to use and which we're not, because it gets pretty crazy after you're writing a song for a month and you start sending ideas back and forth. It's like, wow, when are we going to stop? Right. But for the most part, we try to keep it, most of the original ideas if we can. And that's giving it that sort of cinematic landscape, the soundtracky stuff that you're making reference to. There's a lot of layers in there. Some songs are upwards of 100 tracks for sure.
Good Lord.
Yep.
Good Lord.
Excuse me.
Goodness. And as you can see behind me, I've got my Rush on my wall all the time.
Yep.
Um, it is really nice to hear Alex doing some solos. I haven't heard, good old classic Alex Lifeson solos for years and years. And it's so nice to hear him rip a couple times on this
I
one.
agree with you, Ken. Listen, guilty as charged like yourself. I grew up listening to Rush. One of my first ever shows that I went to was going to see them at Massey Hall when they recorded All the World's a Stage, and so I've followed their career. And being a kid growing up in Toronto, every New Year's Eve, the thing to do would be to go to Maple Leaf Gardens to see Rush and Max Webster or whoever was open, Wireless or something, right? So I've followed his career and Rush's career, and ended up working with him. And now I don't know even how it happened. I'm in a band with Alex, so I pinched myself. But through the writing process of the first record, Alf and I were quite vocal, and we would send Alex an email going, "Hey, at 3 minutes 20 seconds, it would be awesome if what do you think about dropping in a solo?" Nah, doesn't feel right, And so we were like, oh, okay. And it was all in the spirit of what you're talking about. Come on, give me a little bit about, let's get an Alex Lifeson solo on the record, right? So we adopted a bit of a different attitude on the second record when it comes to requests from certain parts. We thought, you know what? Let's just not even ask, and if it feels right, then maybe we might get lucky and he might drop a solo on it, and that's exactly what happened, Ken. And I would word stuff like, at 2 minutes 30 seconds, boy, does it ever feel like we need a shot in the arm? Something needs to happen here sonically. And I would, and as opposed to going, will you please play a guitar solo? I didn't do that this time around. And, if we were as surprised as you were, like, okay, Alf and I'd be going, oh my God, he just sent us a guitar solo. This is wicked, right? And I would say for the most part, the feedback on the first record was quite positive, but there were a lot of people going, "Boy, I wish Alex would stretch a little bit." And he's been quite vocal on interviews that he doesn't want people to think, "Look at me now. I'm going to flex my muscle. I'm going to riff. I'm going to play some solos." So for him, it was all about servicing the song. And if he felt that a song needed a solo to drop it in to maybe bring it to that next level, that's what he was doing. But the funny part is this time around we didn't ask him and we got guitar solos.
Nice. Well, maybe that's the rule for the third album, right? Just let him.
Right? Reverse engineer it. Don't
Exactly.
ask. Right.
Yeah.
That's like me saying when I come to Ottawa, I'm not going to ask you to take me out to a hockey game and beers. I won't ask.
I think it's going to be the opposite, though. You're going to be taking me for beers. That's how it's going to work. Yeah,
That's how the bet works. Okay.
Alex has always been so identifiable. Like as soon as you hear him play one note, you know it's Alex, right? He's
I agree.
one of
I
those.
agree.
Yeah. For me, Alex is top top two, three guitar players of all time, in my opinion. Like what he's
Yeah.
done, and I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm a fanboy, right? I guess you never grow away from being a fanboy.
I don't think so, Ken, and I think you're right when the comment that you said, those guitar solos and his sound are so identifiable, and I think all the greats are like that. Um, you think about Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen. Tommy Bolin is another one. That sound, Joe Walsh when he plays slide, or even Jimmy Page when they play, it's them. You're not like, I wonder who played that solo. You're like, oh my God. And Alex has that tone and that feel that is instantly recognizable. That's why I was a bit when some of the early comments on Envy of None came out, people were like, "I can't even hear Alex," and part of me was like, "Well, I can. That's those parts are so identifiably Alex. Nobody else would play them." But maybe, as you said, with the first album and the difference of the second album, it's a little bit more in your face this time on the second record. So the guitars have been pushed up a little bit, but. I can't agree with Dave more, man. Like Alex is definitely one of the best guitar players in the world, and to be able to have the luxury of listening to our tracks and then muting them and hearing what he did on his own. There were many times I'm like, oh my God, this guy is a genius. The stuff that he comes up with is next level, Ken.
Oh yeah, there's no other word for Alex than that. But now let's stop the fanboy thing here for a second, and I
All
want to
right.
talk to you about the bass. Um, the bass is groovy on this album. Like it is.
Thank you.
I know we're talking a lot about Alex and how he's coming out more in the mix and all that stuff, but without that bass going, these songs aren't flying. And I'm not just kissing your ass because you're
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
in front of me, but um, they sound fantastic. Like
Thank you, bud.
so my first question, and you nerded out before, so I'm gonna nerd out here for a second, but what are you playing? What
Okay,
instrument
well,
are you playing?
yeah. So there was a variety of bass guitars on the record, but I'm going to go back to it before I tell you about that. I'm going to go back to a comment that you just made when you said the bass is groovy. If you take the Y off of it and you just the groove, I feel that's one of the most important roles a bass player can have in a band. And for me, we spoke earlier about the drums, and we've added human drums this time around. So, I think all bets are off if you don't have a strong rhythm section at the foundation of any song, right? So for me, the groove was so important, and to explore and stretch on those. Some of them I think are more straight ahead with the eight notes on a song like maybe The Story or something like, that's pretty relentless eight notes, which my nickname from the Coney Hatch days is Earl of Eighth Notes. I play more eighth notes than anybody, right? Maybe Greg Godovitz from Gatto says he's played more eighth notes than me, and he's probably right. But 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 then some of my favorite bassists are actually quite funky. I love Jamerson, who played on a lot of R&B stuff. I love reggae. So I've started to, on the bass playing, the concept of it was trying to concentrate on the groove, trying to really cement in the foundation of the track so that everybody can layer on top of it. Um, there's that funny saying about sometimes less is more, leaving some space. So I'll play a line, leave some space, play, go to a whole note feel to leave some space, as opposed to just being in your face plotting all the time, right? And then, my wife kind of pulls my leg saying, do you really need that many guitars and basses and stuff like that? So my excuse usually is like, yes, I do, because a painter can't just paint with one color. So if I was to go through my collection of basses with you, Ken, like the ones that we used I used on Stygian Wavz, they all have a very different tone and characteristic. On Not Dead Yet, that was my old BC Rich Mockingbird, which is a short scale 1982 model, and it's reefed through a Tech 21 pedal with lots of edge and bite, and you can hear the clank of the strings and the fretboard. But I used an eight-string bass, on the new trip, and then I used a fretless Jaco Pastore's bass. And on, the fun part is that I wouldn't use certain basses all the way through. So even on like Handle with Care, I used a Dan Electro shorthorn bass again through the Tech 21. Doug Pinnick pedal was the constant denominator through the whole record. But I would be muting it with my right or left hand on like Handle with Care with 16th notes and doubling it. I did a lot of doubling left and right with bass guitar this time around. And then as soon as the bridge hits, I'll just change it and I'm playing fretless bass in there, or I'm playing a Moog keyboard bass or something. So um, I really did try to stretch out with the different tones of the bass and not only stick to electric bass, but play some keyboard bass too. And so when the listeners listening along and when we're taking you for a ride on our songs, you can hear it sonically change. You can hear guitar parts coming in, but bass is changing. Throughout these songs all the time, which is something that I normally didn't do, and bass players normally don't do that. They just grab a bass, put it in, plug it in, and play from top to bottom. I completely threw that out the window this time and tried to experiment with tones. So, I used my Elma Combo wood bass that was made by Lucian that is more like a Fender bass. I use that quite a bit. So really between the Fenders, the Dan Electros, 8 string, I use 12 string Hamer, I use fretless. So I would say honestly, nerding out with you, maybe 7 to 8 different bass guitars and different keyboard tones throughout the record.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple things on that. You mentioned Doug Pinnick pedal. That dude's
Yes.
awesome. I love throwing out names and saying how much I love these guys. I love
Yeah.
King.
King's X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, I don't think you can top Cliff Williams for King of the Eighth Notes.
Yeah. Actually, you're absolutely right. And I saw a funny thing on Instagram where I think prior to Cliff, I believe there was a guy named Mark Evans who was the bass player from AC/DC for a short period of time. And it was a very funny Instagram. And if you can find it, and you're a bass player, it's worth finding. So they interviewed Mark Evans and they said, "Tell us about the different bass lines." And he said, "Oh, they're all my bass lines are really different." And I'm thinking, no, AC/DC, they're not. Where's this going? Right. So he goes, "Here's Livewire." And he starts playing do, 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 do. And he goes, "Here's, rock and roll foundationers." And then he goes, do, 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 do. And they're all 8 notes through everything. They're just different notes, right? But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If there's one band that I love that maybe I'm guilty of wearing on my sleeve, and that's AC/DC, and the eighth note foundation. When you want to get some groove happening and you want to lock it in solidly, maybe no other band that does it better than AC/DC.
And like you said, less is more, right?
Yeah,
Like he
yeah.
doesn't have to be playing Getty lines,
Fancy. He's not
right?
fancy, right? And and it's funny that you brought up Getty because, especially I'm pretty sensitive about my place with Alex and what we're doing. And I have so much respect for Getty, one of my all-time favorite bassists, and he and I are friends too. And let's call a spade a spade. I'm not even in the same league, not even in the same ballpark. And so there was a conscious effort for me not to maybe get push the envelope. I mean, in terms of busyness or moving parts, on the second record, considerably less than the first. There was a song on the first record, "Look Inside," where I had a distorted one, and it was quite busy and stuff. But this one was intentionally laying back and being more of a foundational basis. And I didn't want to even go there. I'm like, no, Geddy Lee's the guy. I'm not going to try to go, hey, and now I'm playing with Alex. Watch how fast I can play. And believe me, I spent hours and hours and hours learning Rush bass lines as a kid. If I picked up a bass now, I could show you, and it took me like weeks to learn that. And that's and like between Geddy Lee and Chris Squire and Stanley Clark, Jacko, those are kind of like my four bass players, or maybe add Mars Cowling from the Pat Travers band to that too, because he was such an amazing bass player. So those guys are my heroes. And maybe sometimes I wear those my influences on my sleeve, but Geddy is just next level bass player.
Yeah, I was thinking about that while you were saying that. Um, we were talking about Alex's distinctive sound. Like that whole band, every member had the most distinctive sound for each of their instruments, right? As soon as you
Oh
hear
my
Neil,
God.
you know it's Neil. As soon as you hear Getty, you know it's Getty. How
Yeah.
did, oh my God, that's just the
Yeah.
stars aligning when those guys hooked up, eh?
Yeah, like the Clash of the Titans, like oh my God, the holy trifecta, like those three as players. but getting back to Alex, and Alex again on this whole set of new Envy of None interviews, like he's quite vocal about saying what he felt his role was in Rush, which was maybe to be the glue between, Geddy and Neil, because they're very active players. And he said he could have joined the party, and he sometimes did join the party where all three of them, were just like pedal to the metal. But for the most time, he was quite conscious of what Ged and Neil were playing, and wanted to complement them and figure out, okay, how can I be the glue with these two guys being so prominent?
Yeah, he's almost like the bass player in any other band, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, so this is really interesting to me. I know it's probably not going to happen, but I gotta ask, with all the stuff that's going on in each of these songs, I'm guessing it would be pretty tough to do live. So, but I'm hoping there's a chance that there's some shows. Is it a possibility or is it just too much?
No, no, Ken, it's actually probably the number one topic that we've been discussing internally as a unit since the record was released. Wouldn't it be amazing and so much fun to play these shows? It's going to be really difficult to figure out how we did get all of those right. When could we possibly do it? Where would we play if we were going to do it? The one thing I'll tell you is, again, Alex has been pretty vocal about, my days of touring relentlessly are over, and he's earned that. 50 years of being in Rush, it doesn't really excite him, the notion of going out and touring. And I'm not far behind him. I do, Coney Hatch has played so many shows, and it's a lot of work. It's as much work to put together one show as it is 30 shows, right? But we've gone as deep as discussing how many musicians we would need to pull this off live. And if we were to see Envy of None, I think you're looking at probably as many as nine people on stage, and so that's the four that are on the record plus a drummer. That's five. We would bring in an extra guitar player. That's six. Keyboard player seven. Um, Two vocalists to help Maya out, eight and nine. So there you go. So it's like a minimum nine people on stage, which we're okay with because, we would want to represent those songs live. And we've even gone as deep as talking about which musicians we would want to have with us. So these are conversations that are happening right now. And we're like, we got to figure this out if we can. But it's a lot to take in and figure out how we could pull it off, Ken, but it is the number one topic right now that we're discussing internally.
You know, Ottawa's only about 5 hours drive, right? It's not so bad.
Yes,
That's not a major
nuts.
tour.
No, no,
You can handle that, I think.
just a hop down the 401, right?
Exactly. Any Coney Hatch news?
The Hatchers are laying low this year. We finished off the last year playing a really cool gig in Manchester. That was a bit of a sort of a small hard rock festival. And then the very next day, jumped on a plane and a train and automobiles and got to Paris, just outside of Paris. We played another show. So we ended the year off with a couple cool European shows. And then we started this year by getting into the studio, and we've got two new tracks that we sort of bite off two tracks at a time. It seems fairly manageable. We're geographically challenged with Dave Ketchum, our drummer, being living up in Thunder Bay now. So we took advantage of him being in the city, and we went into the studio and recorded couple new tracks, and we've been doing overdubs with Carl Dixon and Sean Kelly. So we'll figure out what's going to happen with those tracks, Ken. The Hatchers are like my version of a beer league hockey team. I love hanging out with those guys. There's no pressure. It's my comfort zone, and we're having fun doing a couple recordings right now. And we did record both of those shows in when we were in Europe, and we're kind of sifting through them now to see how the performances were and if they're maybe worth mixing and releasing as a continuation from Postcard from Germany. Maybe this one will be Postcard from Manchester or Postcard from Paris or something. I don't know. We've been just getting the wheels turning on where how we could actually keep um the hatch alive and well.
Nice, nice. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question before we get to my rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And this is pretty cool, and it's Envy of None, but it's different. I received an advanced copy of the Triumph tribute album called Magic Power.
Ooh, you got an advanced
Yeah.
copy.
I did because yeah, the publicist wants me to review it.
Okay.
First of all, I will say this to anyone who doesn't know, and most people probably don't because it's not out. Holy crap, this is the best tribute album I've ever heard in my life. Um, just so people can get an idea, Gowan is on it. I talked to him last week. He's coming to Ottawa
Yep.
Sunday.
He's a great hockey player too, by the way.
Yeah,
Tell Larry I said hello.
he's really mad at me right now because I asked him to pick the Leaf Sens series, and he didn't want me putting him on the spot. But yeah, he's a great guy. Nancy Wilson is on it. Phil X Slash is on this. Sebastian Bach, and some band name.
Todd Kearns.
Yeah, and what's the other band? Envy of None, doing my all-time favorite Triumph song, "Blinding Light Show."
Well, we share that in common. I've loved that song since the day it came out.
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Um, but what I think people are really going to dig about this album is how you took such an iconic song in Canada. I don't know how big it is in the States, but in
Yeah.
an iconic rock song in Canada, and you totally changed it, but you still kept the main idea going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to tell me, how did this come about, and where did the idea to do it that way come from? And yeah, dude, it is amazing, your version of Blinding Light Show. It's
Thank you for saying that, Ken. We had fun doing it, and I'll tell you exactly how it came about. So Alex and I, and Alfio actually have been friends with the guys in Triumph for years. Coney Hatch toured with them back in '85. That would have been the first time that I met them. I struck up a really keen friendship with Gil Moore when we were out on the road back in the '80s, and we stayed in touch forever. I've recorded many times at Metalworks, and Gil and I and Alex have played golf together because they're golf freaks, you know. Alf is one of the instructors at the Metalworks Institute of Technology, so he's also close with Gil. And then we started expanding on the relationship after I left Coney Hatch and had my solo band. One of the first tours I did was opening up for Rick Emmett after Rick Emmett left Triumph. So Andy and Rick were out touring, and so Rick and I struck up a friendship then. And then I've always loved Mike Levine. He's one of the kindest guys, and we're fellow bass players, and we geek out. And in as I wear different hats in my career, I help those guys with the Allied Forces box set because they knew that I was one of the people that worked with Rush on their box sets. So they called me up and said, Andy, we love the Rush box set. Would you be able to work with us on the Allied Forces box set? And I said I would be honored to. So I took a bit of an executive producer's role and helped those guys put that record together. And during that time, they alluded to the fact that there was going to be a tribute record coming up. And so I got a call, two different calls, one from Mike, one from Gil, saying, would you and Alex consider guesting on the record? Um, so for those folks that don't know about the record, for the most part, Mike Klink, the producer, who is probably best known for Appetite for Destruction, he was a producer with Guns N' Roses. So the guys in Triumph put Mike as the executive producer. And then, as you just referenced, like all these amazing musicians, he put them together. We're going to have Phil X on guitar with Nancy Wilson here, or Todd Kearns, and he put together sort of like super groups for every different Triumph song. And so when Gil and Mike asked Alex and I to be involved, we hung up the phone, we called each other, and I said, maybe why don't we do something different? Because we were right in recording Stygian Wavz. I said, instead of doing guest appearances on songs where I'm just going to play bass and you're just going to play guitar, why don't we go back to the Triumph camp and ask them how they feel about Envy of None doing one of their songs? So we did. They were fully in. They said, "This sounds great." I think we might be the only band that other than what I would call the supergroup bands that appeared on the record. And Mike and Gil said to me, "What song do you want to do?" I did the fanboy thing, and I said, "I've loved the Blinding Light show since I was a kid, teenager. I used to see Triumph, and that was my favorite song." So what we did was Alf and I went in, we deconstructed it, we kind of put an Envy of None spin on it. I sent it to Maya, and Maya was like, "Oh, I think I remember hearing this song on the radio. I think my dad was a fan of this band," because she's late her 20s, right? And so the familiar part is Maya loved the melody line so much that she did not stray from it. She put a Maya Win touch on it, but it's undeniably it's the same lyrics, it's the same melody. So that was the constant denominator. And then we just kind of put the Envy of None stamp around it with deconstructing the arrangement. Alex at one point said, that middle section where Rick plays classical guitar, I'm going to play classical guitar, but it's going to be my ode to Rick. And, I played a bit of fretless bass in there. As I told you, I kind of, deconstructed it. And honestly, we wanted to put the Envy of None stamp on it. And then when we finally delivered the song, I got a huge compliment from Gil saying, with all due respect to everybody else, they kept pretty much to the plot. They tried to sort of emulate that hard rock sound, whereas you guys really took the Blinding Light show and went really left of center. And A, he loved it. B, he kind of complimented us for taking the chance and stepping outside of the box and putting an Envy of None stamp on it. So I'm hoping Triumph fans like it, but we did take some liberties. I'm going to say that for sure.
Well, they're gonna love it. I mean, you don't want to hear a note for note reproduction of every song, but yeah, I mean it. Oh my God, dude! When I heard that, when I got the album and I was looking at the track listing and I saw who was doing each song, the first thing I did was I jumped to Blinding Light Show. It was the first song I heard.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so then, everything else is fantastic. I mean, Bumblefoot is on there. Oh my God, the people on this album. But they're gonna love it. I mean, it's fantastic. I love Triumph and I love Rush. And I always thought they had a big problem with each other. There was always those rumors that they had a feud. But I'm glad that Alex was showing his admiration
Yeah.
for Rick. Rick's a
No,
great
if
player.
anything, Ken, we're all friends. I'm not aware of any kind of rift between the bands other than they were both three-piece and they're both Canadian and they were both out at the same time. And if anything, when you talk to Gil or hear his interviews, he's very complimentary about Rush, how they paved the way for them and opened doors in the rest of the world and the States for other Canadian acts, right? And the only other thing I'll tell you that I think is interesting and might help explain sort of from my perspective, what we would want to do with the Blinding Light show is I said to when Gil said, "Well, what are you thinking of doing?" And I said to him, you know, oftentimes I'll watch, something on Netflix or Apple TV, and I'll listen to the music that's going on, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's probably how I discovered Tame Impala, which is one of my favorite bands." And like you hear a song and then you immediately Google and you go, who plays that song during that period of the movie? So I had been watching the Motley Crue called The Dirt, and for the most part, it was, I think it was, I don't know. I listen, it seemed like a lot of it was very not true to what really probably happened in the day. But I remember watching an episode and a female artist by the name of Megan Kabir did a amazing version of Live Wire. And if anybody knows Live Wire, that's a balls to the wall, smash you across the head rocker, right? She completely destructed it. It was haunting, it was moody and everything. So I said to Gil, I want you to go listen to Megan Kabir's version of Live Wire. This is what we are going to do to your song. We are going to give it an enema in a good way. We're going to completely turn it like upside down on its face, right? But I would encourage hard rock fans to go listen to that version that Megan did. It is by far one of the best pieces of music in that documentary with Motley Crue. And her name is Megan Kabir, and she's a great female artist.
Awesome. Great artist, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also one more thing before the rapid fire. Does Maya Wynn's voice give you chills the way it gives me chills? She's
Oh
so,
my God, dude. Yeah.
and it's just so, I don't remember. I think the last time I got chills like that from a voice was probably like Ann Wilson.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just when I hear her voice, I just, oh my God, like,
I
whoa.
agree, Ken. I get goosebumps. There are times, full transparency, when she's finished stuff that I'll actually have like I'll well up and have tears in my eyes, especially with "Handle with Care." That was a song that she and I really collaborated on and meant a lot to us. And when I listened to the finished version, man, I got a little bit misty. But she is a special talent. Her ability to layer and harmonies that she comes up with. And I think her finest hour, ironically, on this new record is the title track Stygian Wavz, because what she's done with her vocals and the layering and the different takes that she did is bordering on orchestral. There are like, upwards of 20 to 40 tracks of vocals in there, despite that there's one lyrical line. And so she treats her voice like an instrument. And I don't know too many other vocalists that approach their singing that way. She's a special talent.
She sure is. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a fanboy, and I don't mind admitting it to
Yeah.
anybody.
I'll tell Maya that she's going to be really stoked to hear that
Uh,
were complimentary about that.
Absolutely beautiful voice. Okay, it's rapid fire time.
Rapid fire. Pew 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 pew.
Stupid questions, stupid
Hit
answers.
me, buddy. Hit me.
Um, there's a lot of problems going on. This is not a political question with the States and Canada, so I'm really focusing on Canadian artists and Canadian music. So I have changed the name of Mount Rushmore to Mount MoreRush because
Oh,
I
I
think
like it.
we need more rush, and it's not a
Yeah.
rush question, but it's kind of like anyway.
Yeah.
So I asked Lawrence Gowan his Mount MoreRush of vocalists, Canadian vocalists. I asked Phil X his Mount MoreRush of guitar players.
Yeah.
So now I'm putting you on the spot. Your Mount MoreRush of Canadian bassists.
Love it. And Kate, so before I answer the question, remind me how many heads are on Mount Rushmore. Is it four or
Four.
five?
Four.
Four?
Yeah.
Okay, so this should be pretty easy. Geddy Lee,
Yeah.
Mars Cowling from the Pat Travers Band, Ken Spider from Streetheart, unbelievable bass player. It's the fourth one. Let me think about this, man, because you know those three are so amazing. I'm forgetting somebody here as a Canadian bassist. I mean, God, let me think about this for the fourth one. You've stumped me on this because I stopped at three. Um, You know what? There's a Montreal band called Voivod. I wish I could tell you who their bass player was, but like, I'm sorry, if ever he gets to listen to this, but Voivod were so cool. And that dude in Voivod, he steps out. He's pretty damn cool. So he would be the fourth one.
I think I saw Voivod open for Rush once in Montreal.
Yeah, you probably did.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So my top four, just for fun, are Getty,
Yep.
um, Mike Tilka,
Max Webster, there you go. They had some great bass players. Yep.
Jim Cale.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. With the guess who? Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know why this guy always sticks out, but Andy Cregan from the Bare Naked Ladies. I think that guy's bass lines are absolutely incredible.
You're right. You're right. He's a very, very accomplished bassist. Yeah.
And
Plays the
that,
upright too.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Next question. And those are good answers, by the way. But I don't think there's anyone who would say Getty's not their first pick. No.
Absolutely. Nope. He's the
Yeah.
man.
So we talked about this at the very beginning. This was one of my rapid fire questions. Leafs or Sens in the playoffs. You're picking the Leafs. and we've
I'm
got
gonna, yeah, I'm
beer.
gonna pick the Leafs. I'm gonna pick the Leafs in six.
Okay, I'm going Sens in seven.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
Beers and chicken wings are on the line.
absolutely they are. Okay, two more really quick ones. First concert you ever saw?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I like to tell people that my first one ever was the Edgar Winter Group on the Shock Treatment Tour. And the opening act was Bad Company. That's a far more rock and roll story than my first real concert. I was a big BTO fan and I was dying to see BTO. They were opening up for the Beach Boys. So I was like, what the heck? Like, you're talking about maybe 16, 17-year-old Andy who's like just a complete metal hard rock nut. And I'm like, the Beach Boys. Um, so I went to see them at the CNE grandstand. And the minute BTO finished, I left. In retrospect, I should have stuck around. I should have stuck around to see the Beach Boys, but this little hard rocker was like, don't want any part of it. But it
Yeah,
was, I believe it was the Not Fragile. Maybe that record was what they were touring off of. And at the time, I thought that was a pretty heavy record.
yeah, absolutely. And just for reference, Def Leppard with Uriah Heep opening was mine.
Nice one.
But
That's a good one.
I'm pretty sure my mom took me to see Nana Muscuri once. So I don't mention that one, but
So Mr. Dress Up doesn't count, right? If I say I went to see the Friendly Giant and Mr. Dress Up, those don't count.
I think I saw Harry Belafonte too when I was. I don't count that because I'm a rocker
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Okay, one more. First gig you ever played. Do you remember it?
Oh, do I ever, man? Do I ever? This is a good story, dude, because the original guitar player from Coney Hatch was a school buddy of mine, and his name was Tim Broyd. And we hadn't put to like Coney Hatch wasn't even a thought at that time. We were just jamming in basements, and he was a big Johnny Winter fan, and we were playing, Johnny and Edgar and Led Zeppelin, and we just would jam in basements. He calls me up one day and he knew that I liked punk rock too, because there's a part of me that a lot of people don't know that I love, alternative new wave punk rock music. At the same time, I was a hard rocker. I was buying The Police and The Clash and Johnny and the Hot Rods and Ultravox and all of those bands, right? So I did love what we called back then new wave. So my friend Tim Broyd calls me up and he says, I got us a gig. You're the bass player. I'm the guitar player, and we're playing at Larry's Hideaway, and we're going to be playing at a punk band. And I'm like, what? What's going on? He goes, yeah, my friend Jonathan Gross, he's the writer for the Toronto Sun. He's got a column, he's the He's putting together a band called The Deadlines, a little play on words. And I don't know who the drummer is, but we're going to play Sex Pistols and Ramones and some other cover songs, right? Are you in? We're playing Larry's Hideaway. I'm like, are you kidding me? I definitely was not old enough to play in that bar. I might have been 17, maybe 18 years old. We opened for Teenage Head. It was epic. It was epic, man. So it was a blur. I can't even remember. I've got a photo of me playing on stage that night with I had a Rickenbacker bass, which is not very punk rock when you think about it, but we played a half-hour set. And then the reason that I'm lengthening this story is because I was a huge Head fan, and I still am, and I'm friends with some of the members that are still alive. And I went out to watch the show, and this is a true story. The band starts and they are like a hurricane. They hit the stage. It was full punk rock in its glory. It was Larry's Hideaway was a gritty, filthy, dirty, gin-soaked bar that had, the clientele was bouncers and bikers and hookers and like you name it. It was a gong show. They hit the stage. They're about halfway through the first song, and this guy in the audience comes running out of the audience and sucker punches Frankie Venom in the head, knocks him flying into the drums. Bouncers all come in, grab the guy. The band's still playing. They don't even miss a single note. Frankie gets himself dusts it off, gets back up to the mic, and bouncers have now tore this guy out, and they're bringing him outside to beat the pulp out of him. And he says, "You're just mad because I fucked your girlfriend."
Ah, there you go.
And
There,
I was like, "Oh my God, this is so punk rock."
That I was just about to say the exact same thing. How punk rock is that?
Yeah. If I wasn't a fan before that, I was an even bigger fan after that. So that's my first gig. It was quite eventful.
That that's incredible. Like most people say they played in their basement for a few friends or something like that, but your first show with the wow, man, oh
With
man.
the deadlines. And there was the last thing I'll tell you, Ken, is I was honored to be invited maybe about a year and a half ago to Hamilton when they did a tribute concert for Gord Lewis, who had passed away. And the guys in Teenage Head asked me if I would come up and sing a song with them. So, and I didn't play bass because Steve Mahone's a buddy of mine. He said, "You can play bass too." I said, "No way, man. I'm going to do my best imitation of Frankie Venom, and you can play bass." And so we did the song Picture My Face, and I brought the poster from Larry's Hideaway. I had saved it and I showed it to him that night. And I said, "This is, you guys won't even remember, but I was in the deadlines. My first ever show was opening up for you guys." Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So it was fun.
Okay,
Came full circle.
that first gig story might be the best one I've ever heard.
Nice. Yeah.
That
I challenge people to top that when they're on with you next, Ken.
no kidding. I mean, that's a full-on gig.
Yeah.
That's not a party gig.
No.
No, that's awesome.
It's a good movie, possibly a good little movie miniseries. But
Right. Uh,
yeah,
and also, I looked it up just so you know. If you're talking about Voivod's bass player from the beginning, his name was
yes.
Blackie Terrio or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, they were great. That's a great band. I think
Yeah,
Jason Newsted even filled in or joined that band
y-
for a while.
you're right. There's some kind of a Metallica connection in there, but I really liked Voivod because they were, they were kind of proggy, experimental, weird. I loved it. I loved the fact that it was different. I love finding bands like that. But he was a great bassist.
Yeah. You know,
But I did forget the Max Webster bass players because they had two or three really good bassists and throughout their career.
yeah, Tilka was the beginning though, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, he was something. I was talking to Gowan about this on Friday. Canadian music, man. There's so much great. Like we were talking about everything from, it basically started the rock music with like Neil Young, Guess Who, and it keeps going. And it's just incredible the amount of great musicians and great music that this country's put out, you know?
I couldn't agree with you more, Ken. I was at the Junos a couple of weeks ago and just realizing what a breeding ground of talent this country is, and I think about everybody from, like you said, that started back in the beginning, whether that was Ian and Sylvia Tyson or Gordon Lightfoot, and then you go all the way to the Weekend. Or just so many, even Biebs. Let's give Justin Bieber his props, man. Like, just it's something in our drinking water, I think.
And I've been doing so many interviews with people from Canada. I did the Grapes of Wrath, 50
Yep,
40, uh,
love 5440. Yep.
Sass Jordan, Kim Mitchell. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And it's just such a shame that the Americans don't know most of these people.
It is incredible how many weren't able to permeate the border. You even think of Tragically Hip, but
Right.
obviously some of the bigger ones that we spoke about with Russian Triumph were able to, and Brian Adams and even BTO and the Guess Who that were able to break down the border and become international successes. But yeah, it's encouraging to see, and every year Canada seems to spawn somebody that just takes over the charts, right? And so that's that. This is a good, proud elbows up moment, Ken.
Absolutely. Elbows up for sure. So let's recap this whole thing. Stygian Waves, it's been out for I'm not sure how long.
Couple weeks, maybe.
Couple
Couple
weeks.
weeks. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Fantastic album from Envy of None. Nothing on the go yet. Maybe some stuff with Coney Hatch. Everybody check out the Triumph tribute album. Envy of None is, well, should I say this? The highlight of the album.
Oh, I love it.
I'm
That's nice.
putting some pressure on you. We'll see. Yeah. And maybe maybe some shows with Envy of None at some point soon. And
Yes. Keep an ear and an eye out for that.
right, and you will have to buy me beers and chicken wings in about 3 weeks, I'm guessing, 2.5, 3 weeks.
Okay. That remains to
Actually,
be seen.
let's say just over a week because it's going to be a Sens sweep. And
Oh, now you're calling for a sweep. You went from seven to a sweep. Okay. All right.
no, 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 it's not going to be. But yeah, everything is fantastic. The album is great. The Triumph is
Thank
great.
you, Ken.
Cat was great. I really appreciate this. Give a super big Ottawa high five to Alex next time you see him, and
Absolutely, I will.
and tell Maya amazing. And if you ever see Randy, or in the next little while you'll see Randy Cook, tell
You
him
tell him he gave you your start. He
he
gave
gave
you
me
your
my
start,
start.
Ken.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, as
Um,
as always, Ken, I had a blast, and thank you for the support and the kind words and having us on. And yeah, I would just encourage people to just keep checking in on envyofnone.com and for the latest and greatest. And if there's a will, there's a way, and we hope that we might be able to play some shows. So that's what I'm focused on right now, seeing if we can make that happen.
awesome. Andy, thank you so much for this.
Ken, thank you for the time, dude. Always great to see you.
You
You
too.
know how to get in touch with me if I lose the bet. I'm ready to make good on it.
Best of luck, Andy. Thanks again. And again,
Thank you, Ken.
great album.
Thanks. Thanks, brother. You take care, all right?
You
Bye-bye.
too.